So agentic AI is giving an AI a broader goal and then giving it the autonomy and the access that it needs to essentially make decisions on its own to service the goal. That's been known for a while, that theoretical picture of agentic AI. People have known about it for a while. A lot of people had predicted that 2025 would have been the year agents really take off. They were wrong. It's 2026. It's definitely the year of agents.
This is Small Press, Big Ideas, a podcast about the business of local news in the United States. I'm your host, Paul Gawartis. Small Press, Big Ideas is about the opportunities and challenges that local news publishers are facing for their businesses. I'll sit down and talk with journalists, entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and more in the local news industry to find out what's working, what isn't, and how the local news ecosystem can innovate and flourish in the 21st century.
All right, my guest today is Pete Pachal. He's the founder of the Media Copilot, a bit of an AI expert in my eyes, in this kind of media space that we're all in. And I listen, he has a great podcast, like I just said. Pete, nice to meet you face to face. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it, man. Good to meet you.
Thank you, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Like we were just saying before I kind of got us going there, I listen to your podcast regularly, so I have a bit of a good actually, I don't know if I have a full background on you, but for the audience, could you just talk a little bit about your background, kind of your career, kind of what's led you to where you're at today?
Sure. First, thanks a lot for listening. Deeply appreciate it. So what I'm doing now with the Media Copilot, it's a little bit of a culmination of like both sides of what I've done as a journalist. So I've been a tech journalist for really my whole career. I started out when tech was meant mostly like home theater, and like man caves and that sort of thing. So it goes that far back. But then obviously, changed radically over the past couple decades, covered AI pretty closely. But in my media career, I'd also sort of advanced and moved to strategic roles by sort of the end of the 2010s and stuff. So the two things I know are tech and media. So when AI was sort of first arrived on the scene in its current form, which is generally thought of as when ChatGPT sort of took the world by storm at the end of 2022, I kind of knew it was going to change what we did. I think a lot of people did. I wasn't unique in that regard. But I also knew like it's probably a good idea to really get on top of this. And so when I was sort of figuring out what my next move was going to be from my current role, which was at the time I was head of strategy at CoinDesk, I knew I wanted it to have to do with AI and media. And so I just kind of gave myself a job. It's like I've launched a newsletter that was focused on exactly that. So it was a little more niche than AI, but not just about the media, of which there were certainly already like people playing in that pool. And because I think it was a pretty interesting niche that a lot of people, both in AI and media, were interested in, it got a pretty big following pretty quickly. I knew how to do a podcast, so I launched a podcast with it. And then things just started naturally growing from there. Now it's kind of a media consultancy as well as an online academy for people who are interested in learning AI skills and how to apply them specifically to media work. So if you're a journalist, if you're in PR and you're comms, I've got classes that are very focused on those use cases that are most common in those professions. And then a lot of people just call me up and ask me, to help them figure out their strategy around it, and more specifically, like how to apply it on a team level. And that's getting more common now because beyond just like tools getting more sophisticated, like the AI's effect on discovery is very clear now. So everyone's really interested in AI visibility in like search engines and stuff. So that's becoming a big area of interest the last few months. So yeah, like it's a lot of things. When you dive in here, you're just, you mentioned like I'm an AI expert. Like I feel, I guess, like you constantly feel like it's whipping by you, and you're just, if you blink, it's like, holy cow, things are different in just such a short period of time. So I don't know if anyone's truly an expert and is on top of everything, but I do my best.
Very cool. And could you I asked you to talk a little about the Media Copilot for my next question. And what let me expand a little bit is just, I think there's a lot of overlap between our audiences. I think a lot of people forget. Could you just talk a little bit about, it's like a Substack and a podcast, right? Like a newsletter and a podcast. Just talk a little bit about what the content is, like what the kind of people are you talking about. If you have some examples or something like that for folks.
Well, I'm glad you asked, because I've kind of pivoted recently, or I guess, and added to it. So yes, it's a Substack and it's also a podcast, but I've also recently launched a website. Can you believe it? A website in the age of AI. And because I wanted to do more content. So I do my audience surveys like every good, person who has an audience does. And the things that people wanted to see more of. Like they liked my columns, they liked the people I talked to for the podcast and interviews, but they also wanted to see like more case studies. They wanted to see just more sort of practical stuff they could apply to their businesses and their work. And so I actually ended up partnering with a journalism school. So it's the University of Missouri and the Reynolds Journalism Institute there, because they were interested in building an online resource that did case studies. So they'd talk to newsrooms and say, what's working for you, in this era? And they'd write them up and put them on their resource. And so they wanted to talk to me because of my AI expertise. And so we worked it out so that we're doing the content together and they're publishing it on their resource. And I kind of use it a little bit as a like almost AI playground. So I don't republish it, I remix it with AI. And so what I'm doing there is, one, obviously publishing more content in the form of case studies and related stuff, but also like I want to dog food a lot of the things that I write about. So, dog food is obviously the term from tech, and it's like, hey, use the tech that you actually produce so that you're always making it better. And so, like I say, my overall approach is not to judge AI as positive or negative. It's just, it's happening, it's here, and if you can master it, you'll probably do better. That's my, if I have a philosophy, that's what it is. So that's what I want to do, not just as an individual, but as a publication. So I'm sort of learning a lot from remixing. I'm also mixing in more human content. So I've got some peers in the industry who are kind of thought leaders, and they're adding their voices to the site. There's obviously links to the podcast. I'm just looking into other things like, how do I derive more content from the podcast? Like I already do clips. Is there other things we can do? And also looking at video. Everyone's doing more video. Can we do that again with using AI in such a way that you can do as much as you can with, kind of the one-man show I am. I'm not really a one-man show. Like I have some fractional help here and there, but it is like I'm trying to run the leanest operation possible to create this kind of content. And honestly, not sure if it's going to work. I'm seeing what's going to work and what isn't. I'm definitely learning a lot, and hopefully being able to pass those insights on to my audience will be valuable.
Very cool. Excuse me. Very cool. It's I like that you partner with the J School, the Reynolds Journalism Institute. They're doing a lot of stuff like that. I had
Yeah, they're very smart.
Randy Picht and Leah Becerra. They came on the podcast to talk about the help desk they put together, I think, which is kind of a similar kind of resource. So shameless self-promotion. If anybody hasn't, go back and listen to that episode. Really, really cool stuff. Very cool.
I talk to Leah often. Yeah, she's great.
Very, very cool you're doing that. You've already framed it a few times how important it is to, like you said, nobody's an expert and it's changing so fast and everything, AI. I always ask, the majority of the people I have on here are, journalists or, on the editorial side, business side too. And I always ask people their thoughts on AI, even though it's a huge kind of question. And you talk to a lot of folks too, and you work with a lot of people. If you had to gauge the mood of the media professionals you interact with regarding AI, what would your takeaways be? Does that kind of make sense to you? Like,
yeah.
I know how you and I probably feel about it, but I'm wondering what you're seeing other people are their thoughts on.
So like it's really important to not be in a bubble, right? Because I feel like when I talk to people who are doing similar things that I am, like we're all kind of on the same page. We're all kind of like are both daunted but excited by AI, and we're kind of deep into our own workflows and ideas about it. And you kind of get this picture of like, oh, AI is very embedded into everything right now. I don't think that's really the case once you get out of the bubble. I think there's a recent story, relatively recent, that I think underscores what I would call bifurcation among the media journalism field, which is there was a sort of a flare up at the AP where their head of AI strategy said something like, AI is happening, kind of get with the program. And there was some natural sort of, I think the wording was just maybe a little too combative there. Like, I don't think anyone disputes that that's wrong, but there was a sort of a predictable backlash. And I talked to a number of newsrooms, small, large, nonprofits, profit, and a lot of them still come to me who are, relatively small to medium-sized teams who are like kind of still at the beginning of this, right? They're they're skeptical, and editorial teams tend to be like a little derisive of AI, and whether that's out of fear or so they're rightly justified concerns about hallucinations and things like that. But I do think there is a sort of a two camps here. One is that the folks that are just sort of stubbornly resisting and really in doing it in an understandable way, but haven't sort of figured out how to express what they do and how important it is in sort of an AI era and in sort of a constructive way. Whereas there's the other side where it's like, and it's closer to the bubble that I was sort of mentioning earlier, where it's like, oh, this is happening, we're figuring it out. But the challenge there is simply the communication and the change management into where the value is. Again, I think both of these people want the same thing, which is that humans bring unique value to content and to
Mhm.
journalism. What that is exactly is changing. AI is forcing the change. And I think if they can sort of figure out what that is, either from a sort of product and strategy side and from a content and story selling side, then that your publication, your organization is probably going to thrive. And if it becomes more of a combative thing, it's going to be an issue, and you're going to have to get past that. But that's kind of my check on the mood. Is sort of it's a little bit two worlds, and I think more this thing accelerates, this thing called AI, the more that finding the middle ground is going to be urgent, if it isn't already.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think I've said this before on here. I think one of the issues with AI is a branding issue because people think
Mm.
AI and they have their own idea. I think if it had just been labeled like some kind of new software and not artificial intelligence or something, I think there'd be less of the folks like stubbornly I forget how you put it, stubbornly kind of fighting it and resisting AI and everything. Um
Yeah, I think that's how it manifests by default. You kind of like,
yeah.
oh, I don't want to do this. It makes the work worse by their measure. And in some ways, it's true. Therefore, no one's going to want it. And I think that final bit, no one's going to want it. And doing it the human way is going to be better and more valuable. I think that's already been disproven. I think the popularity of AI, and again, this isn't like a mono thing where it's just, everyone loves all AI equally. I don't think that's what I'm trying to say here. What I'm trying to say is that the use of AI in terms of utility is indisputable. Like it's
Mhm.
massively risen. Like, Chat GPT is hockey stick growth. AI overviews are everywhere, whether you
Yep.
like them or not. And if we're being honest, they have gotten better since the glue on pizza stuff. So there is value in it. People are finding the value. And our audience is wrong. Like it's kind of
Right.
like having, journalists or publications argue with their audience like, no, you don't want AI, you shouldn't want AI, except people will vote with their feet. Like if they're
Yep.
getting value out of AI, they're going to. So you need to sort of meet them where they are. It doesn't mean you have to put AI into everything you do, but you have to acknowledge this is part of the landscape, and using it and working within it is just simply a requirement.
Yeah. Um, so the Media Copilot, like I said, I listened to the podcast at least. And you talk to folks from all over the media landscape. This podcast is more specifically focused on local news, local media publishers, just because it's a vital thing for a democracy and it's been under siege for 25 years or whatever. I don't know how long, decades. I'm curious. This is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and it might be a tricky question. Do you think that the kind of rise of AI helps local publishers, like from a business standpoint, the efficiencies gained, et cetera, regain some ground they've lost over the last 2 decades? Or do you think it accelerates their decline that they've been on? Or do you think it's more complicated than that? Yeah, I'd love to get your
Yeah,
take.
I think it can. The local business thing, I think, has so many aspects to it that AI certainly affects, but there's no sort of easy answer to this. It's definitely a hard
Hmm.
one. Again, I'll give you my sort of quick thoughts on a few different things, and hopefully they coalesce into something that's akin to a strategy or some advice. So one is that local media they kind of have to pick their business model right. Like I think a lot of local pubs now have fallen back on a subscription, which is fine. I think that's a good thing to do. Like again, with the AI discovery changing, I don't think just discovery on the web is going to help you at all. So that's good, but that means you have to show a lot of value to your audience. If you're asking them to pay for the content, or that you're giving them something they can't get anywhere else. So you have to use AI not just as a like thing to enhance that sort of funnel of people coming into your publication, but also to enhance your ability to give them good content. And I think on the local level, there are a ton of tools that help for that. So,
Mhm.
there's all the tools that will summarize, like YouTube. You've heard about all this stuff, right? It's a
Mhm.
school board meeting that's on YouTube. You can easily summarize it. You can get a thing. I think that's fine. I also think there's a little bit of this is sort of the eat your vegetables aspect of local media that I think is obviously necessary, but also like it doesn't excite people. And I think the next level of this, and what I hope more publications sort of figure out is somehow to marry the sort of audience formats and networks and things that they're just kind of into now, and mold it in and put that through a journalistic lens so that you can get something more like a picture of your community. What I mean by that is like there's a lot of activity in these communities. There are people on Facebook groups. So I can speak, authoritatively as a parent, in a smaller town, and there's a lot going on in these Facebook groups, right?
Mm.
And so that's kind of
Tell
where
me
the
about it.
news is happening.
Yeah.
But it's not journalistic. You can't
Mhm.
just get run with it. But you need something that can look at things like that, whether it's Facebook groups or TikToks or whatever else is going, and be a great filter synthesizer and something that can like surface all that relevance in a way that serves it up to your audience. And it might not be parents. You might have something different for or you might have a different publication entirely for the kid publication or what have you, young professionals, etc. But I think no one's really mastered that, and which is weird to me because I feel like this is shift has been happening a long time, shifting to these other sort of inputs and networks that people don't traditionally think of as the local news per se, but it is what's going on, and it's digital. So by definition, AI should be able to help here, like in terms of finding out what that is and
Mhm.
giving it to journalists to exercise their judgment and provide good guidance to that community about what's going on. I think a big difficulty, there's a human difficulty. And again, this is probably might be a little outside of the AI issue, but I always find it difficult if you're a member of the community. You might have a conflict with what's going on, but the problem is this is like a thing that is sort of emerging in media broadly. Like they say, there's a new saying, no conflict, no interest. Like, why would you cover the community if you have no interest? But then suddenly, like, oh, if I'm writing something or aggregating something that might expose the high school where my kid goes,
Right.
is that
Yeah.
it becomes kind of an issue. And again, this has been an issue forever in local communities, but without that journalistic lens, which I think is super important, I think you get a lot of reluctance to tell those more difficult stories, but they are more interesting and would, I think, cement the relevance of publications and journalists in that community. They just kind of need to cross that barrier and then use AI to really accelerate that mindset. So anyway.
Yeah. No, you framed that really well. I think about it the same way. To me, it's like for local pubs in particular, it's like you need to almost hold two things in your head at the same time. You need to use all these tools to harness the superpower that is AI, and to be like anti AI in a way where it's like there's still a person showing up to the thing, connecting with the community, and it's like trying to figure out how to kind of marry those two things and run a sustainable business and everything. So that is a challenge. It's a hard question, like you said, but that's why I asked it. You're an expert. You said there's no experts, but I'm considering you an expert in this stuff. So that's
Appreciate
why
that.
I asked. So on your LinkedIn, it says, I just had it pulled up here, sorry, that you help newsrooms, communication teams adopt generative AI with rigor, ethics, and measurable outcomes. Um, I pay attention to this stuff a lot, and it still took me a long time to get this through my thick head, generative AI. And then it seems like recently there's been a huge rise in agentic AI. For a long time, I wasn't paying enough attention to realize the difference. And it's kind of really hit me like a brick in the face just in the last couple months. It seems, I don't know if it's accelerated a lot in the last few months or if it's just my circle and stuff I've been reading. It seems like it's getting a lot crazier. Do you have any thoughts here on agentic AI? I know it says you do mostly generative things people are doing, things you're seeing happening in the space, anything like that?
It's definitely accelerating, by the way.
Okay,
So,
I'm not
like,
crazy.
you're
I thought
not,
maybe.
you're not.
Okay.
And that's a nice reminder, maybe for me to update my LinkedIn and add agentic there. Sure, like, because generative AI underpins all of this, right? Like,
Hmm.
the wave that we've had for the last several years. Like, generative is the core of it. The AI can sort of come up with its own ideas. Not really, but you know what I mean. So agentic AI is giving an AI a broader goal and then giving it the autonomy and the access that it needs to essentially make decisions on its own
Hmm.
to service the goal. And that's been known for a while, that theoretical picture of agentic AI. People have known about it for a while. A lot of people had predicted that 2025 would have been the year agents really take off. They were wrong. It's 2026.
No, it sure
It's
it sure
definitely the
seems
year of
like it.
agents.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, this is why I was sort of alluding to the speed of things. Like, you think about what's happened just since the holidays, and a lot of developers sort of sat down for the first time over the Christmas holidays and were using Claude Code for the first time, and just things exploded. People built things on top of it, like what's now become OpenClaw. And so, what this has done, it sort of furthered that bifurcation I was talking about, because the people doing agentic stuff are just really rapidly advancing. But it's also like changed a lot of, like, exactly what you said, like how people even think about AI.
Hmm.
If you are enabled, everyone's kind of enabled, but for your work, it's hard to be, because what I said about agentic systems needing access, a lot of businesses have an issue with that, and rightly so. But if you are working agentically in any way, even for your personal, it changes everything. Do not exaggerate that the way I work now here, we were to set us in time and space, sort of in March 2026,
Hmm.
is totally different from what I was even doing in January 2026.
Me
Uh,
too. Yep.
yeah, you fire up one of these things. For me personally, it's Claude Cowork. So, like, again, I'm a journalist. I'm not a coder. I don't code. I'm not that technical, even though I cover tech. The Claude Cowork, it turns that agentic experience into a conversation. And so you don't have to, I mean, it helps to know API keys, and certainly I get by and that sort of thing. But you can just tell it, okay, like, this is a real example. Like, I need an email marketing funnel built for the classes that I'm going to teach this spring to journalists and PR professionals. And, anyone who works as a knowledge worker in front of a screen has all this software that they use. And chances are you hate a lot of it. One of the things I hate, I won't name the software platform, but it's a very commonly used software email platform. I hate it. I hate going into it. I hate scheduling things and doing automations. It is not what I ever signed up to do.
I have a guess of what it is, but I won't say it live. It's okay.
And I don't want to screw up your sponsorships, but anyway, I hate doing it, and now I don't have to. I just tell Claude Cowork, like, basically, it can write all the stuff for me. Like, I could have written all the emails, months and months of years ago. Like, AI would just do it, but now it's like, okay, instead of just serving up the emails to me and like, here, here, human, here's what you want to go put it in your email platform. I just respond with, well, you do it. I don't want to do it. Like, no, here's my login. Here's the browser. Here's a folder for you to work in. Let me know if you need anything, but use your judgment on this. And I
Hmm.
don't want to touch this thing. Like, maybe show me like what you've written at the end and I'll just approve. But that's it. And I've repeated that time and again for all kinds of projects and software platforms. I've crossed more things off my to-do list in the last month than I have probably in the last 6 months. Agentic work is here. It's real. It's bifurcating the workforce because the people that are doing it are getting much more productive. And I'm not sure how this manifests, not just in the media, but in society. So also in terms of self-interest, it's really kind of screwed me up a bit, in sense, like, I have all these sort of curricula I have built for my classes. And yes, with AI going so fast, I do have to update it pretty regularly. I feel like a lot of it's irrelevant now. I do feel like with the dawn of agentic work, it's almost like, well, just, tell the computer what you want it to do and it does it. Now, admittedly, it is more nuanced than that. If you
It
use
is.
Claude Cowork, you run into issues, and it doesn't always interpret things right. You get these weird browser things, the pop-ups that it sort of can't deal with or can deal with, depending on how you set it up. So there are things to teach and things to figure out, and it's evolving rapidly too. So it's not magic, but it is, once uh, get to that level of embracing agentic work becomes a different thing. And I look forward to the day when we're all essentially the CEOs of our own workflows and just tell agents what to do, because I see that coming much sooner than I thought it would.
Yeah, it feels like a superpower. With the way I've been thinking about it for myself recently, it feels like I just got I haven't done much with Cowork. I need to look into that still, but I'm working with Claude Code, and
Yeah,
I feel like I just got a six-figure developer on my staff
yeah.
for
Same thing. I mean,
$20 a
co-working
month
code.
that I pay for it. Yeah, so I've been using, just as a kind of case study, I've been using generative AI in my business for clients for 2-3 years now, creating stuff. And then I've kind of fallen down this rabbit hole of agentic and gotten into Claude Code, and I'm like, I can build this into a platform and not have
Mhm.
to,
People are.
make it, yeah, easier for them to access, more affordable for them, easier for me. It's just, it's crazy, and it's going very quickly, and it's really hard to see even like a couple years into the future what it's going to look, just everything, the economy, business, newsrooms, like you said, it's drastically different from January, from this year. It's March. It feels different from the beginning of the year, to me, in my world, in this office right
Totally
here.
different. And like Claude Code, yeah, Cowork, it's sort of the same thing. You have a little more granular control in the code. And
Okay,
if I had started there, I'd probably still be there. It's just
gotcha.
Cowork had come out by the time I was sort of really embraced this. My editor he's an OpenClaw enthusiast. So, this is something I actually haven't talked about before, but I'm excited to write about it, which is that we now have an OpenClaw powered content system. Like basically, we have a writer slash editor that's based on OpenClaw, who it will write news for us in our style, but not just write it, like agentically put it in our CMS and queue up all the things, all the little settings that humans need to do, like who's the author, where's the read more thing, what's all the Yoast information, etc.
Hmm.
And all of that is just done automatically now. So it just serves up a thing that's 95% done and say, is this good? And we come in as editors and add again. This is the key part of what this new era forces. That's where we add the human element, and we look at what's actually written, and we're like, wait a minute, this is off, and we check the facts that are key, and we make sure that this is valuable. That's the number one thing. It's like, well, you wrote something, but it's like it's an aggregate. So do we really want to run it? Have we added a perspective here that the audience cares about? And that's the key now, I feel
Hmm.
like, in a lot of, no, well, a good significant amount of media and maybe journalism. And like, what figuring out when AI can do all of that stuff, where is your value? Because there is value, like a lot of the stuff, again, another recent sort of incident with the Cleveland plain dealer, and everyone read
Yep,
about
I
this.
saw
And
that. Yeah.
the really short version of that story, if you're not familiar, is that this guy at the Cleveland Plain Dealer, a local publication, they fully embraced AI into their process. And the reporters there, a lot of them no longer write. They gather facts, sort of put them into an AI rewrite engine and interviews and stuff like that. And then that writes the story. And then they have final approval. And a lot of like people in journalism like balk at that. And I think that's justified, right? Because it's like, well, there is a deep concern about if you're not writing, you're not thinking, and you're not getting better at writing and sort of thinking about structuring things as a story. I think that's very fair criticism. But at the same time, I think you have to acknowledge, particularly for news, like which is sort of more of a sort of functional update me kind of
Hmm.
format. It's pretty formulaic, right? Like kind of inverted pyramid, a AP style. A bot could probably do that pretty well. And I think we all have met reporters who aren't really good writers in our time, even though they might be good reporters. So this is, again, AI is forcing these questions upon us, which are hard. It's not just
Hmm.
obvious to embrace this thing, but some will, and they might be able to build successful businesses on them. According to the guy at the Plain Dealer, they're winning back time and they're doing more stories and opening new markets. So that sounds like
Yeah,
a success story to me.
me too. Yeah, yeah. The way you were talking about it, the phrase I admittedly stole from another podcast and I've been using all the time is the AI sandwich. Have you heard that? It's kind of like
I don't think so.
the people in the organization are the bread, and the AI is like the meat of the sandwich. So there has to be
Oh.
somebody like feeding it. It does a ton of the work in the middle, and then you still got to check it, make sure everything's actually working, fact check it, et cetera, and all that stuff. That's kind of
It's
how
so
it's
funny.
actually being used right now. Yeah.
I get it. It's sort of a different perspective. And it's probably because, AI has changed so much. But I used to sort of almost frame it in the opposite way. This is sort of how I used to frame AI probably, 6 months to a year ago, and still sometimes pull this out, where I'd sort of frame it more as a pipeline and that like, okay, you think about all the things that go into a story, your research, your interviews, all, et cetera, like finding sources. AI is very helpful at a lot of that. Not the interview specifically, but like most of the other sort of research ideation. Then on the other side of the pipeline, there's like the distribution, sort of the proofreading, the social media stuff. Like AI is very helpful there too. And it was kind of like the middle part where I was like, well, if it's writing for you, that's where things get dicey. And now it feels like we're flipping that a little bit. Not flipping it exactly, because I think AI still has a lot to offer in those, but when you sort of first certain things like the things we just described, that middle part, it's probably less sacrosanct than it used to be 6 months ago, right? And that's probably the biggest change that's going to happen and is sort of in the midst of happening with regard to AI and journalism and media this year. Like this whole thing where AI is getting a more of a presence in the writer's room, just so to speak. A lot of publications have experimented with it and some have stopped and some continue. And I think more will continue and more will get added in there as sort of this stigma that I think the Cleveland Plain Dealer incident sort of highlighted, and people are questioning the stigma, even though for most journalists, like I think they're sort of, again, default to that resistance. But it is like, I think that the sort of majority, not quite majority, but like, there's a silent backlash to the backlash of that. That's like, wait a minute, that doesn't sound terrible. We can work with that kind of thing. So I feel like that view will probably get stronger as the year goes on.
Yeah, the stigma has definitely come down because there used to be a hard no from what I could tell around the space, the media space. And yeah, you see these kind of cracks. I had a guy on the podcast who he was at Microsoft for years, and he launched a Substack during the pandemic in Palm Springs, California. And he's since then grown it to a few different towns in that region. And it's almost entirely, it's AI. Like he's built, like I said, he worked at Microsoft for 20 years or something. It's just a crazy case study of like the extreme going that way. Like he barely touches it at all. So there are those use cases, and I have people on the podcast that are like, nope, never going to help us with it, which I get it. I get it too. At least in its current state, I wouldn't trust it either. On the generative front.
To be clear, I'm talking specifically about certain types of formats. I think most publications also have analysis, and they have opinion, and they have things with voice, and that is a much more difficult thing for AI to do. Even if it can sort of in an ersatz way, kind of like simulate it, the audience trust of it is a big factor, right? And again, you don't return to a columnist you like purely because of the quality of the writing every single, like, you know what I mean? Like you come to the voice because you get to know it over time. And that human connection, that's impossible to simulate with AI. So it's not like people are defending like AI, it's going to replace everything. Obviously it's not, but it probably has a greater role in the content production than it has traditionally been viewed in the last couple of years. And I think that's what we're going to say. Like more publications try to figure that out. Like where is that? And to return it back to the AP, well, probably for quite a few things.
So this is kind of one of my standard questions. And like I said, a lot of times it's publishers. And I ask them where they see the local news industry or their publication in 5 years. Since you're, once again, the AI expert, Pete, this is going to be a really hard question to ask, considering I just said how murky it is even now. If you had to flash forward 5 years, where do you see the AI media landscape? It's like I said, it's going to be a hard one considering how drastically it's changed in the last 3 months, like you mentioned. But where do you see the trends going? If you had to make a prediction, what would you say our world looks like then?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, 5 years from now, AI is going to be fully integrated into our media ecosystem. So I'll make a bold, and maybe it's not so bold anymore, prediction that Google search, it still exists, but it's very minor compared to people just going to Google or what have you and asking for information. And so in other words, at some point, maybe not this year, probably next year, or if not the year after, AI mode, which is what is, a Google mode in Google, becomes the default. Becomes all conversational. You can still get a list of links, but it's kind of like they'll just have a button for it. If you want the links,
right.
And so what that's going to change, well, it's going to be reflective of a change because that's what people are going to be expecting. Number one, it's like they're going to do things for their audience, not just for their business. I mean, obviously it's for their business, but they'll build their thing around it. So that's where we're going to be. There's going to be a lot less going to websites. Certainly, that doesn't mean there's going to be a lot less trusting of brands. Right? I think trust is going to be something that's much more measurable. It's going to be the thing that everyone's indexing for, not just publications, but brands. PR firms are going to be very successful over the next couple of years who can show their value and increasing that trust score, because that's the thing that's going to be the thing that drives everything, because people don't know what to trust. They see AI, they question hallucinations, but there's also the deep fake aspect of it. And, there's all this stuff. Like, trust is in short supply now. So anyone who can index to more trust is great. I have no idea how the monetization and compensation is going to play out. I do expect some kind of simplified model, whether that is just I don't know if it's going to be pay-per-crawl. I'm skeptical of pay-per-crawl systems, but I do think some kind of value exchange at the AI level that's more akin to syndication. We have licensing agreements now, but I think there's so many competing systems now that track attribution. So again, it doesn't necessarily mean every crawl is paid for, but you can sort of see in aggregate the value you're bringing to any particular AI exchange. So I think that's going to get figured out, but broadly, it's that will be kind of the minor part of a value exchange. I don't expect a lot of people are going to monetize like bot traffic as much, even though that will be a thing. It's going to be more like, once you have the trust, how do you then keep people coming back to you and that voice? And part of that is, I think the key thing that I think the media needs to figure out here is, how do you make sure you capitalize on that without giving all the control to the AI platform, whatever it is, right? And I think some of the more innovative publications are figuring that out. Like, they're building their own agents, so to speak, which is, the Time AI agent is, I've read about it before, and I only really hold it up as an example. As like, oh, they've agentified their own interface, which is, again, I don't think that's interesting that they have a chatbot, because that's like the manifestation of it on their site. Oh, there's a chatbot, and it's smart because it's grounded in the Time stuff. No one cares. But the great thing about that is that, well, they have a chatbot that can talk to other chatbots. So now, if there is that value exchange figured out, like I talked about before, then it's super simplified how the how the media company can now start controlling how their audiences interpret them without giving total control over to whatever it is, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and just relying on their tech to interpret their brand correctly. They're interpreting their own brand correctly and then kind of selling it that way. I think some version of that model will be the dominant thing, but it's got to be scalable. It's got to be plug and play. And there needs to be a good value exchange. And if they can figure that out, then the media is looking pretty good, even without websites.
I had a guy on from, he worked at Google for years. Now he has a startup out in California for local news. And he was just saying, he's like, I don't know why anybody even, sorry, Pete, I know you have. He's like, I don't know why people even launch a website in 2026. Just with the way, he was talking about like the framework of the internet and how it's like an expanding balloon. And if you're not there early, it's just harder to get like a traction or everything. I didn't have this in the prep, but you've talked about it a few times, especially right there. I'm curious, there's probably people listening to this that are curious too. You talked about trust and how search is going to look entirely different. And I know you do some work with this. Do you have any tips on like how media brands or people you see are showing up in generative AI like queries and searches now? Do you have any tips for that? Because I should have had that as part of the prep in here.
Yeah, that's okay.
Too kind of vague of a question. Yeah.
Well, my main tip is you got to show up. Like, I mean, I think a lot of philosophy and approach that publications have taken up until now is like, well, I'm not going to show up until someone pays me. Well, you might be waiting a long time. And in the meantime, other people will steal your authority on things because they will be in those answers. So it doesn't mean you have to ignore the monetization question. Like, you should, whatever, still pursue licensing deals. You should still, if you're choosing to sue someone, do that. But you need to be in answers. Like, you need to pay attention to this. And so there are smart ways to do it. So one, be there. Two, be smart about it. So look at what is behind a paywall, what is Google seeing, more importantly, and what aren't they? And same thing with AI bots. You need to be more sophisticated, clearly, than just doing robots.txt, which is the robots exclusion protocol, which supposedly tells bots what to do with your content. And really, a lot of them ignore it.
Yep.
Even if the bots themselves don't ignore it, there's a lot of third-party bots that do ignore it and get your content, and then those AI people can do business with those third parties.
Right. Right.
Everyone kind of knows that's happening, even though no one will admit it. So in other words, your content's being harvested anyway. You should sort of have do your best to have as much say in that as possible, and you need to learn. So if you're not looking at GEO, generative engine optimization, and how your content is manifesting it, like, you need to start, and there are ways to do that. You don't have to spend a ton of money on one of these firms that purports to do that for you, although that you could do worse. But you can at very least look at the traffic you're getting from AI, which I admit is minuscule. But if you think of these AI engines less as traffic robbers and more as lead qualifiers, so to speak, so that, like, yes, the click-through rates are much lower, but I think it's fair to presume, well, if someone has actually clicked through after seeing the AI summary, they're probably pretty engaged. They probably
Right.
are like, oh,
Right.
this is like good content, because they had a choice and they were reading this thing and they wanted to come to see you. So there are opportunities to make that person into a loyal audience member that probably don't exist for the nameless, faceless, generic traffic you were getting 10 years ago. Again, I'm not promising at all that the gains from that will offset the losses that you're going to have if you have an advertising model. I think it's pretty clear they won't. But this is the world you kind of need to pivot to. So that's kind of the most important thing. And again, you could spend a lot of money on one of these firms that does these analytics, but you could also study it yourself. For starters, it's not really as hard as you think. You can establish a baseline of your own. You could try a bunch of different prompts, and then you can use agentic AI to help you with this.
That's what I was
Even
going to
just sort
say.
of loosely,
Yeah.
and sort of study what the results are in those prompts, and then look at what that baseline looks like over time. That's a great start, and that costs you nothing. I mean, other than some money for the agent and the AI you're using, and then start there. Start looking at strategy and things to emphasize, de-emphasize. Start looking at what kinds of content do bring people in more than others, and start pivoting your content strategy around it. And over time, you'll either sort of build out your own platform around this, or probably call one of those firms that's really good at this.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. I think that could be useful to some folks, myself included. It's just something I've been kicking the can down the road on, just for my business and all that. Also, it's a lot to keep up with.
Yeah. To be clear, again, this is a very new area. I don't think a lot of people have figured it out, even the people that study it all the time, because it's not just new. It's like the AIs are changing so quickly. And once a new model comes in and once a new licensing deal comes in, one thing we're all sure of, it's very different from the open web. So if you go to, say, ChatGPT and you compare how you surface in that versus Perplexity versus Claude versus Gemini versus Copilot, all, good things to do, I think you're going to see vastly different results based on what they're weighing, because a lot of this is, some of them use Google as sort of the back end of their indexing, but a lot of them are doing their own indexing. So now they're building their own versions of the web and how to search it, because every time they use Google, they have to pay for it. And so we're getting vastly different sort of engines in terms of searching for information. And then there's the whole wild cards of who's suing who has a licensing deal with who, which obviously is going to greatly influence the results you see. So if they're searching in Perplexity, I doubt it's going to elevate the New York Times and News Corp as much as it will other sources, and ChatGPT might be the opposite. Well, they're also suing, New York Times also suing OpenAI, but you know what I mean? So it's getting weird. It's getting weird out there. Like, people it used to be you had one Google and the results were fairly consistent. Yes, they added personalization, so I'd recognize people would Google something over here. They wasn't quite the same as everyone else, but by and large, it was the same. Now it's worlds apart, depending on what you use. And that is a very interesting place to be.
Yeah. You were talking about just studying it yourself, have Claude Cowork help you figure this stuff out on your own, or go to one of these firms. We talked about nobody's really an expert a few times. That's my thing with these firms that offer the promise to rank you. And it's moving so fast. I question anybody that has so much confidence that they're that they can actually accomplish. Just the way the models are changing and everything.
Yeah, I mean,
You know what I
the
mean?
proof is in the pudding. I would invite people to try it out, and again, you
Yeah.
got to really embrace it for a while and see if you can get insights that point to things you should do differently. Do those things differently, and then see how it goes, and then also see how you can turn that into a business.
Mhm.
Again, it's not something you're going to figure out in a week. Probably not even 3 months, but you might start seeing signals after 3 months.
Mhm.
And again, this is the future. Like I say, I mean, if you believe anything I said about what the vision looks like 5 years out,
Yeah.
it's all going to be us just talking AI. It's not all, but like a lot of it. Well, then we're all just going to like, what's the information on this? What's that? And then, like I say, the human stuff where it's like, oh, so and so columnist I trust or voice said this thing, call that up. ChatGPT or Perplexity or whatever future AI interface it is. And then that comes prominent. And then I'm suddenly potentially a loyal customer for you as a media business. And maybe
Right.
that media business is all just Substacks now. I don't know. Like maybe that's what's going to happen, but
Oh, man,
could
it's
happen.
crazy. Awesome, Pete. I feel like I could keep talking to you for a while, but we're coming up on time, so probably a good place to cut it. What do you want me to link to? Where can people find you? The Media Copilot. I think I found you on LinkedIn, so I'll do those. Anything else you want me to promote or anything?
Sure. Please come to my website. It's mediacopilot.ai. That's where you can find pretty much everything like my newsletter, my podcast, and classes. And you can find an easy way to reach out to me if you need some consulting or anything like that. Custom training sessions I do all the time for individual companies. That could be easily just like a lunch and learn. Or some people want me to build whole programs. I can do all that too. But my schedule's filling up. So
Awesome.
please call quickly.
That's a good place to be. All right, Pete, thank you so much. This was amazing. I have a lot to think about after this one. So appreciate you taking the time and spreading the good word. This is really fun.
Thank you, Paul. It was a lively discussion. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to Small Press Big Ideas. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to help the show, the best thing you can do is to tell a friend or colleague and just take a few minutes to leave a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to right now. It only takes a minute out of your day, but it really does help the podcast grow and reach more ears. Check back for new episodes every Monday.